In the last class, we have discussed about regionalism, right? We have discussed about regionalism and a bit of insurgency, but this is not going to be a complete class because in fractions I have discussed something about regionalism, how it has created some factions and also you see it has created this different state in the Northeast. And today I'm going to take something which is interesting for you because it is about media. Okay, so what we understand by media, media is basically something which stand in the middle, right? So it is the medium actually through which we try to you see give an exposure to a mass, as well as we try to create a change, we try to bring social transformation, and also it becomes a pillar in the civil society. So when we are talking about media, media has an intrinsic role in the civil society. So it becomes a realm of, you see, responsibility. It becomes a realm of freedom. It becomes a realm of autonomy where you can realize your freedom, your autonomy. And hence, when you are talking about media, uh, uh, it is important to know certain characteristics. But today I'm not going to discuss about those very characteristics of media because this is not a class to know about the characteristics. We can discuss later on. But I'll give you a timeline of different newspapers in Assam that will give you an idea about development of journalism in Assam, especially. Then we will move to media in different other states in Northeast. First, I will give you an idea about journalism in Assam. So, when is journalism? So, among different form of media, I have picked up journalism today because it is one of the medium through which you see you can convey your thought in a way that you can make the perception of the people, help to people to see the perception, right? So when we see journalism, it happens to be an activity. So we understand journalism by an activity of gathering, assessing, and presenting information in such a way that a society can develop, society can happen to move in a progressive direction. At the same time, it create a link between government and the citizen. It also establishes a forum. It establishes a space for debate and discussion, and it becomes an agent of surveillance, as it has performed some role, right? It has performed some role like watchdog role, and also it helps to facilitate public participation in decision making, right? So when you're talking about journalism in Assam, you see the kind of journalism which we get to see in Assam is a sort of community journalism. So journalism can be best defined as a community journalism because it creates a friendly neighborhood across, and most of the time it is local oriented. It highlights the local issues of the community. And hence, when we are talking about journalism in Assam, it is mostly community oriented, as it is not that city centric, and it is not that, you see, uh, uh, metropolitan city related news, or it is not like, you know, that national or international oriented base. But we see that journalism in Assam is much more local oriented, and hence we can also rename it as you see this community journalism. And at the same time, we also see that uh, it helps to you see create a feedback, and also it helps to feed the interpersonal communication. At the same time, we see that there is a person, his name is Kenneth R. Bayali, and he's the one who actually talk about community journalism. This happens to be a concept, journalism, which is local oriented, different from citizen journalism. That difference we'll discuss later. But when you're talking about this community journalism, it is much more local oriented. It is oriented towards create a neighborhood and linkage around this neighborhood and go deep into the community, study the problem in the community, and then give an exposure to the problem which is deep rooted in this community, and then create an arrangement, or even try to solve that issue of the community. So that journalists become a kind of community person. So journalist came out from the community, or at the same time we may also see that in community journalism we get to find journalists who are quite oriented towards local issues. So they also think nationally, they think internationally, they write national stories, international stories, which has local relevance, which affects the day-to-day life of the local people. See this, which affects the everyday life of local people. So in that way, we say that when you're talking about community journalism, it has an intrinsic relation to the local issues, to the neighborhood issues, as well as it actually feeds the interpersonal communication in the village or in the community. And when we're talking about the community is very small community. You may say a district or a town or an administrative headquarters. So, it reports those local, local stories and incidents. Now, you see that Kenneth R. Bayali actually talked about this community journalism, because he is a person, he actually ran a newspaper. He published one newspaper, and later he became a professor in University of North Carolina. And he actually found that this term community journalism is quite broad, because it involves not only people from the community, it also make journalism quite localized. Okay, so we will discuss about the pros and cons and also other aspect of this community journalism, you say, later on. But we will highlight here today. I will highlight here some of the newspapers at different period of time, and it has created a mark in the history of Assamese literature, and it has created certain trends. Say, so when you're talking about Assamese journalism, first Arunodaya came to our mind, right? So when you're talking about Arunodaya has already started an era. Then we are acquainted with Arunodaya era and Junaki era, right? These are the two era. One is Arunodaya era, and second one is Junaki era. Junaki era started from 1889, and it lasts to another 50 years. It is actually extended, although Junaki magazine ceased to publish and continue after 2003. But you see that Junaki era, when we talk about, it is one of the literary era. When you talk about this development of different, style of writing, trend of writing, it actually extended for another 50 years. When you talk about Arunodaya era, Arunodaya actually started, this happened to be a newspaper, right? First, it came as Arunodaya Sanbad Patra. It was published in 1846, Arunodaya Sanbad Patra, And then after 4 years, by 4 or 5 years, 1851, it became Arunodai. Okay, and you see, it has played a very crucial role in the development of literary trend in Assam. It has created new prose style. It has introduced you see, short stories. It has also introduced dramas during that period of time, and that's how we could actually see that we have certain development because it has created an awakening among the youth. When you're talking about this Arunodaya era, it has created an awakening, intellectual awakening among the youth. And basically, this Arunodaya paper was missionary paper. It was run by Baptist missionary. Right. So it's a missionary paper, but the writers of Arunodaya era were, you see, Christians as well as non-Christians. When you're talking about Christian writers, then you see that you have this Miles Bronson, then Oliver C. Carter, and also Nathan Brown. Nathan Brown happened to be the editor of this paper. Okay, and they were the Christian writers. They basically had that pursuit to carry out and propagate the religious doctrine across Assam. So their writings has got that the themes of religion. On the other hand, we have non-Christian writers like Anandaram Thekial Fukan, we have Hemchandra Barua during Arunodaya era. So they focus on that development of that literary trend in Assam, you know, and they focus on the style of writing because the Christian uh, writers, they focus on simple Assamese, and their writing style was also quite Western. And hence, you actually see the influence of Western style in Anandaram Thekial Fukan's write-up during that period of time. But thereafter, we see that when we are talking about these non-Christian writers during this Arunodaya era, we see that they have contributed developing new prose style. And we also have short stories developed during that period of time. And also you see the Seuti is one. It is actually, it was written by Laxminath Bezburwa. Seuti is a short story, first Assamese short story, is one. And Bhanumati at the same time, it's a novel. It was written by Padmanath Buhai Bodwa. And it is also Arunodaya era. It was followed by, it's a Junaki era. So you see, Arunodaya era has created help to have that intellectual awakening among the youth. It also inspired youth to think scientifically. And you see, the aim of the missionaries was to spread Christianity, but at the same time, they also wrote school books. They wrote some, you see, other religious books. And other Christian, like non-Christian writers, they have contributed to develop new style of writing. So in that way, we see that Arunodaya era has contributed to the development of Assamese literature. And then we have Junaki era. Basically, it is known as, you see, this is an era of romanticism. So you get to find different trend of poetry. So poetry has come up, short stories have come, novel series of novel has have come into this particular era, Junaki era. And Junaki happened to be one magazine, as I have already told you, from 1889, it lasts till 1903. But that era continued because the era continued from continued after 1903. It started from 1889 and continued after 1993 also for another 50 years. Okay, so here we actually see, apart from Laxminath Bezburwa, we also have Padmanath Buhai Bodwa. He is another person who contributed a lot during this period of time. Hanumoti happened to be one of his novel published during that era in a series. Okay. Then we look at some of the newspaper. Arunodaya happened to be one newspaper at the same time. Then we have also other newspaper like one newspaper was Assam Vilasini newspaper, and this was actually published from Majuli uh, by 1871, and it was published by and Dr. Dev Goswami. He was the Satradhikar of Auniyati Satra, and he, with the kind of grit and you see and courageousness, he actually took that step because Majuli at that point of time was very backward, and infrastructure was also not developed, and there is no condition for development of printing press or even publish any newspaper from that land. And he's the one, he actually you see uh, uh, Dr. Dev Goswami, with that courage and that dedications, he published that paper. It published in 1871, and you see, by 18, then it actually ceased to exist, and then again it was relaunched for 1 year. Not even 1 year, sorry, it relaunched in 1883 and it ran to 1924. Then another news was important, Assam Mir. Assam Mir was a Bengali newspaper. It was brought in 1872, and it was under the editorship of Siddhananda Chaudhary of Barpeta. And then there was another Bengali newspaper, Paridarsa, and that was under the editorship of Bipin Chandrapal, and you see these Radhanath Chaudhary. So that came in 1876. In between, we have another newspaper, Assam News. Assam News came in 1971, and it was a bilingual newspaper. And Hamchandra Borua, you might have heard about Hamchandra Borua, who was the author of Hamko's dictionary, right? So Hamchandra Borua happened to be the editor of Assam News, and he introduced like a new spelling. He introduced some of the spelling. Even he also tried to improve the excellence or excellence of the Assamese literature during that period of time. And also we know the Batari Kakot. It is a derivative of newspaper. It came during that period of time when Assam News brought to be. So Assam News came in 1971. Okay, it was actually a bilingual newspaper. There was another person, Abhay Shankar Guha. It was published from Guwahati. Abhay Shankar Guha was the one who is associated with the English section of that English version of that newspaper. So it was a bilingual basically. And Hamchandra Borua was the editor of that paper. Then we have Assam Bonti. Assam Bonti is special. Why it is special? You see, the significance of Assam Bonti lies in its lies in the kind of forum it has created, the way it has developed. Because you see, it developed out of public donation. Okay, at that point of time, Padmanath Guhai Borua collect contribution from the community and the local people, and then he ran that paper, Assam Bonti. Okay, and Mathura Mohan Borua was another name, was associated with that paper, Assam Bonti. So in 1900, that paper came. Then we have another paper, came in 1918, that was Ahomia, known as Ahomia. And Ahomia was a contribution of Agarwala families, Chandra Kumar Agarwala family, to the Assamese literature. and literary world, and you actually see that Ahomia paper, we have another paper that is called Doinik Ahomia, that actually came in 1946, before independence that came. You don't have to confuse between these two papers. Ahomia came in 1918 and Doinik Ahomia came in 1946. And Debokanta Borua was the editor of Doinik Ahomia. And the speciality of this paper is that it started Okonir Sora for children. Okoni, we call it. Okoni mane is a bacha, they're called children. Okoni Sora. That was for the first time it has created a separate segment for children. And Doinik Ahomia, which was started in 1946 under the editorship of Debokanta Borua, the founder editor of Doinik Ahomia, and they started Okoni Sora, and also it's introduced later to editor, happened to be another section. So in that way, it attracted attention and also popularity of the community of Assam. The thing is that you see these papers are targeted to one community. They actually cover some incident from that locality. So it could not attain that, you see, mass base. So hence these are known as community journalism. All these papers are part of community journalism only. Okay, then we also say that we have another paper called Dekahom that came into being in 1935. Dekahom was edited by Ambikagiri Rai Soduri. You know about him. He is Ahom Kekori, right? Ambikagiri Rai Soduri is a Assam Keshari. He is known like that way, Ahom Kekori. Ambikagiri Rai Soduri was the editor of Decca Ahom, and the Decca Assam, you say, or Decca Ahom, you say, it came in 1935, and it became a you say. A mouthpiece of that orthodox families or conservative families of Assam, and it also at the same time it was nationalistic in its orientations. So that was another paper. Then we have Baturi. Baturi came in 1930. And it was published from Thengal. You know, Thengal is a village in Jorhat district, 8 kilometers away from Jorhat district. Basically, it's a village, and where you get to find the residence of Siva Prasad Borua. So that Baturi published from Siva Prasad Borua's residence. Siva Prasad Borua happened to be a tree planters at that point of time. So that Baturi became Doinik Baturi in 1935, and you see that also came up with around 2,500 copies. It printed more than 2,500 copies, and also you see that that was happened to be the first daily newspaper as claimed by Lakshmi Nath Phukan. Lakshmi Nath Phukan happened to be a very eminent journalist. So Doinik Baturi was earlier Baturi. Baturi was a weekly newspaper. So if you look at the periodicity of this newspaper, we see that there are monthly newspapers, there are weekly newspapers, there are tri-weekly newspapers, there are fortnightly newspapers. So when you're talking about Assam News was bilingual newspaper. First bilingual newspaper published from Guwahati. It was a weekly newspaper. At the same time, Asomia, we have that Ahomia, that was published in 1918. That was also a weekly newspaper. We have Doinik Ahomia, that is published in 1946. Again, it was weekly newspaper. Decca Ahom was also weekly newspaper. Then Baturi came in 1930. It was also a weekly newspaper, but it turned to be a Doinik newspaper. It's a daily newspaper. And it also changed its names. It is known as Doinik Baturi. In 1935, it is known as Doinik Baturi. Okay, and with the, you see, initiative of Siva Prasad Borua, who was the tree planter. From his residence, this paper was published. As I have told you, that it has crossed more than 2,500 copies, and it also recruited people as well as compositors. At that point of time, it has created a trend of salary. So that was a full-fledged, you say, that managerial arrangement made through Doinik Batari, and hence Laxminath Fukan said that it happened to be the first daily newspaper in Assam, Doinik Batari. Okay, and you also see that if you look at the size of this paper, 45 centimeter wide and length, and 30 centimeter cm wide. So it carried in that way. Okay, and then we see that we have another newspaper that is known as Nagaur Kotha. Nagaur Kotha came in 1935, although it was not recognized. It was not recognized that much. Nagaur Kotha was edited by Mabjud Hussain. Because it was Jorhat based, and it only reported the incidents of Jorhat. Hence, it could not get that much of recognitions, and it was also a daily newspaper, and it did not last for many years. Another was Pratibha by Rohini Sodri, that is another newspaper we have, and then we have Assam Siva. When you're talking about Assam Siva came in 1937, and you see we have Hari Krishna Das. Hari Krishna Das happened to be the one of the Gandhian fellow, and he's quite inspired by Gandhian ideology, and under his initiative that Assam Seva came into being, that paper had also a role to inspire the youth of Assam to take part in freedom struggle. Okay, and you see Vijay Chandra Bhagavati happened to be the editor of Assam Seva, but you see it had to stop during Quit India movement, and then again it was relaunched in 1948, and it was published from Tejpur. Then we have Tarun Assam. Tarun Assam was another paper that ran for 4 years. It was started in 1939, and it ran up to 1942. So you see, most of the newspaper could not survive for more than 3 decades, and some of the newspaper ran only for 3 or 4 years during that period of time. So when you're talking about Tarun Assam was actually it was first established by Nandeshwar. So it was printed, published by Nandeshwar Chakraborty. And then we have another person, this Tarun Bhattacharya was the editor of that paper. And then we have Janambhumi. Janambhumi paper came in 1947. As I have already told you, I'm giving you a timeline of paper. So, and I'll also share some slide with you. I have not developed those slides right at this moment. That slides I will develop, and I will share those slides with you. So Janambhumi came in after Tarun Assam. We have Janambhumi that came in 1947. And it was a weekly paper at that period of time. It was edited by Dulal Chandra Bhuyan. Dulal Chandra Bhuyan happened to be the lecturer of JB College. And then another person who was associated with the editor's team was Jagdish Phukan. Jagdish Phukan happened to be the son of you see Laxminath Phukan, who was also a very eminent journalist. And then you see Trailukanath Tharma. Trailukanath Tharma was associated with this paper Janambhumi since its very inception. And Trailukanath Tharma was the editor of this paper from 1951 to 1969. Then we have Prafulla Borua from 69. Prafulla Borua continued to be the editor of Janambhumi till 1886, and then Manoram Borua took over. Okay, Janambhumi introduced some of the innovations in that paper. It became Doinik Janambhumi with the effort and contribution of this is Konak Chandra Sarma. Okay, yeah, he's Konak Chandra Sarma only. So, with the effort of Konak Chandra Sarma, who happened to take these administrative responsibilities, managerial responsibilities of this paper, and it became Doinik Janambhumi by in 1972. Okay. Then we see that it introduced certain innovations, like it has introduced Moiner Mal. That is another segment. Moiner Mal was introduced, and also it introduced a separate segment, like under the cover of green leaves, in order to encourage the educated tree planter, the tea garden workers, as well as children of tea community. And then also separate segment were maintained for youth. Okay, and also occasional that literary segment were also maintained in order to give exposure to the literary uh, contribution of Assamese writers. So this kind of innovation it actually carried out, and that's why it was popular and oldest circulated newspaper. It is known as the oldest circulated newspaper. And then we see Doinik Janambhumi it came, and then thereafter we have Doinik Ahom. Now, when you're talking about Doinik Ahom, uh, Doinik Ahom actually started in 1965, and you see Kritinath Hazarika happened to be the editor of Doinik Ahom. Uh, and uh, and it gave exposure to Assam movement, and it also played a very crucial role during the student movement in Assam. And student movement started in 1979, and it lasted till 1985. So you see, that paper has created an awareness about the movement, about the motive of this movement. And then we have Azir Assam. Okay, let me Azir Assam. Before Azir Assam, we actually say that Doinik Assam also faced that censorship because it also it has to go to court to fight for these impositions of the government. So it had to face that censorship from the government. So it has played a very crucial role in exposing the various aspects of this movement. And then Azir Assam came in 1987. Okay, and Radhika Mohan Bhagavati happened to be the editor of Azir Assam. Okay, and it has also made various literary contributions because it gave an exposure of the development of, various various authors, development of literatures, as well as contribution of various authors like Syed Abdul Malik. Then we have Yogesh Das, Navakanta Borwa. So that made the paper very attractive. At the same time, you see that Azir Assam has also introduced some of the puzzles and all for children. Okay, so that also made this newspaper very, very interesting. Then we have Notun Doinik that came in 1988, and it was published by Chandrakanta Press Private Limited. Uh, so we have also Azir Batori. After Notun Doinik, we have Azir Batori. Azir Batori was published in 1991. Okay, Azir Batori, you see Azir Batori was edited by Dhirendranath Chakraborty. So editor was Dhirendranath Chakraborty and executive editor was Manoj Kumar Goswami. That happened to be a Phrase Blood, So Phrase Blood introduced in Azir Batori by 1991. Then we have that Ahomia Protidin by 1995. We have Ahomia Protidin that came up from Sadin House. And Homia Protidin has created a new style. It has given more prominence to photographs. At the same time, it has also given emphasis to commentary and political analysis. So that happened to be a chief attraction of Homia Protidin. And also it has created a new dialect, to which, in the sense from standardizations, it has focused on conversational, like, tone of writing. And it main its focus is to attract the youth of the state. So you see, after Protidin, and simultaneously, not after Protidin, simultaneously, Ogrodut also came up by 1995 with the effort and initiative of Connox and Decca. And it became a one-man paper, because Connox and Decca, who actually reported for the paper, he also, like, he's sold that paper. He was the editor of that paper. He owned that paper. So it was a one-man paper, and Connox and Decca struggled a lot to develop that statue, create that statue for that paper. And you also see that Ogrodut, in Ogrodut, there is a column called Boy 9, that is an editorial column that was also published by Connox and Decca, and that shows that it has created sentiment among the Assamese people not to fear and go fearless. So a different kind of conviction it has created. Okay, but at the same time, the writings are not subjective, writings are objective only. So when we are talking about the principle of journalism, we have the discipline of verification, then objectivity, fairness, impartiality are there. So it followed, and most of the newspaper followed that. But earlier, there are certain newspapers you actually see the more things of literary journalism. Okay, so they give focus on the literary kind of writing. So we come into that literary journalism. So that is something very unique to Assamese newspaper, or vernacular press, when you say. Okay, then we have Amar Assam. Amar Assam, Amar Assam is published in 1997. It was basically GL publication. It was published from GL publication, and Human Borgoy happened to be the editor. No? So you see, Amar Assam, it was the newspaper which started color like printing for 7 days. So for the first time, for 7 days, we had that color pages. Okay, so it was started by Amar Assam, and Amar Assam, it was started in it came into being in 1997. It was published by GL publication. And before Amar Assam, we had Ajir Batori. Ajir Batori, we had executive editor Manoj Kumar Goswami. And Ajir Batori also had 2 or 3 color pages. But in Amar Assam, we actually see we had color pages for 7 days, and that has happened to be another innovation. And then Aji came up in 2000, and okay, there is also Moto that developed. We actually see in Masthead. In the Masthead, actually, newspaper, it is one of the section which highlight the position of this newspaper, and also highlight that editor of this newspaper, status of the newspaper, and motto is also written in the masthead. So in the masthead, you see, like, it was written in Amar Assam that Hottonista Hangbadikota Usorgita, like that way. That means for the you see, truthful journalism. And that's what Aji is another one. Aji came up in 2000, and it under the editorship of Ajit Bhuya. So the motto of this paper is Jati Mati Manuhor Babe, that belong to, you say, the nation, land, and people. So that was the motto. So that is another paper, another development. Then we have Ahomia Khobor. Ahomia Khobor published in 2001, and that was published by Frontier Publication Private Limited. and it came in 2001. Okay, then you see this cover, Ahomia cover was edited by Dr. Kiran Roy, and it introduced for the first time fashion and other segment, an appealing segment for the youth. And perhaps this happened to be the 12-piece paper. It's a long 12-piece paper. For the first time, we had 12 pages long paper in the form of, you see, Ahomia cover. Okay, then we have Ajir Doinik Battery is one that is 2000 that came in 2005. Ajir Doinik Battery. It was published by HK Publication. Editor was Homen Borgohain. And you see, it was published for. It was actually published from 4 districts. So it had developed 4 editions. So it had a Guwahati edition, then Dibrugarh edition, Lakhimpur edition, and it also introduced Silchar edition. So for the first time, that remote, like that remote area came into being, and news from that remote area were also covered. And then we have Doinik Doinik Jonohadharan. Was Jonohadharan printer and publisher. It was published by Jonohadharan printer and publishers, Doinik Jonohadharan, and it was edited by Manus Kumar Goswami. So that was the development. Thereafter also there are many papers that came up. So you see that was basically about brief history of you see Assamese journalism. And when you're talking about Assamese journalism, there are also many papers which might be left out that I will cover in that slide, and I'll share those slides with you. And you see, when you're talking about the newspaper, and Assamese newspaper has got that regionalism, the tinge of regionalism, and that emotions. And most of the people, most of the time, you get to find that regional emotions, and that was quite predominant. And that happens to be one of the basic character of that Assamese people. At the same time, you also see that most of them journalists are not that trained, so professional competence is not that developed, and hence they do not report the issue that sensitively, and that create ethical problem. Okay, that happened to be another issue related to this paper. And also you see that they are not paid, most of the time their salary is less than wage worker, so they are not motivated to work for, you see, create a conscience among the public, and work for and work with that amount of dedication, the amount of commitment. So once there is a salary hike or salary raise, then definitely they will, like, they will be more committed. And also we see that most of the time sensationalism, now we actually see that is also one part. It is because we are giving more importance to sensational stories, that is one thing in the Northeast. And it is with the advent of electronic media, and competition has been created, and hence we see that same kind of story has been covered from different angle, right? So these are certain trends which we get to see. Now I will make it open for discussion. If you have any questions or anything, then you can come up. So I will I'll try to address it. Yeah, listen.
Ma'am, is it important to remember the names of all these newspapers, especially some, and names of editors and the year in which
Very
this?
important for this paper, and that is the highlight of this paper. You see, we have different courses, right? So we have a journalism also, where you actually learn how to write, so how to write about different principles of journalism. We have some principle of journalism, we have some framework also with which we work. And when we are talking about journalism, we think we relate more about social responsibility, right? Social obligations, and also responsibility with the contractors, responsibility for the society. Okay, so when you are talking about this timeline, it is very, very important because in this paper you are supposed to uh, look at the history of media. So when you're talking about the history, it is important for you to know and remember the paper as well as the year, name of the paper, name of the editors, and year when it was published, and some significance of that paper. So at least we should remember, we should know the history, and I will try to find some. Documents from other state also if it is available online, and it is actually difficult to get the detailed history of one land in terms of development of journalism, how journalism has evolved. So we will focus less on different facets of journalism, but if you come across with some question, if I come across with some question, if you ask me some questions related to journalism, possibly I'll try my best to address those queries.
Ma'am, also in both the papers, News, Media, Evolution and Principles, and Media in Northeast India, whatever the PDF file you have shared and whatever the books you have mentioned there, is it important to read, complete reading all those books in this semester itself, or is it for the entire 2 years? Whatever the books you have mentioned.
Whatever books I mention some books
Yes, ma'am. Yes, in both
that
the.
I mention. Okay, might be in the course outline. You
Yeah.
might have got the course outline for all the courses, right?
Not for all the courses, ma'am. You have shared. I think Anjuma ma'am have shared yesterday. I think some teachers have not shared the course outline.
Okay, so you will get the course outline, and in the course outline, we usually follow a format that the name of the books comes so that it is easier for you to find those books. And if you look for books, then I can also give some books. I can share those books with you. You can go through those books, and you can have a leisurely reading at home, and it will help you even to write properly and share with your knowledge. So when you're talking about that new media is different completely. It is not news media. Okay, this is new media. When you're talking about new media, basically new media is a new form of media which is different from old media because of certain features like interactivity is there. We have multimediality happen to be features. Then hypertextuality happen to be a features mm, which makes it different. Features which make it different from the rest of the media like old media like television, radio, and we have traditional media, and we see this drama and street theaters and puppet shows, and it is new because of digital component. So when you are talking about new media here, we will discuss about digital media, different features of digital media, different principles of digital media, and different theoretical framework of digital media. Okay, and for the second paper, media in Northeast, there we will discuss about the historical background of media, evolution of media, then what is Northeast, how Northeast have been formed, geography, topography of Northeast, and status of journalism in Northeast. So today I have discussed about the status of journalism in Assam, not entirely status of journalism. I have actually discussed a timeline of journalism in Assam. We started with this Arunodai and Junaki era, and then we have discussed about different newspapers came up. Some newspapers might be left out also because there are many more newspaper came during that period of time. So I will share some PDF as well as PPT where you will get a detailed account which are being left out today in this class. And it is important to remember the name of the people. It is important to remember the name of the media. Okay, so that's how you will develop an idea about the significance of this newspaper, because we actually came through that. And also you see you will have multiple set of questions for taste also. You see for my paper, you are usually given multiple choice, not multiple choice, given options, alternative questions. Okay, so you will be given alternative questions, so you don't need to worry about answering a question, because if you don't prefer to take note for one class, so you will have another options available. Okay, so looking at your aptitude, I usually set the question paper. So you don't need to worry, but if some people want to know about Assamese newspaper, at least you should have some understanding, and also you should give some example about newspaper in Assam. Okay, these are the papers newspaper developed during this period of time. So
Ma'am, all these newspaper used to be in the Orunodai and Jonaki era.
no, no, no. As I have already told you, Arunodaya era last till uh, uh, that 1886, 87 Arunodaya era, before Janaki era start. Janaki era start from 1889. So Arunodaya era, not Arunodaya era, start from 1846, and it is last till 1888, like that way. That was the Arunodaya era before Janaki came. Janaki era started in 1889, and it actually extended to another 50 years. But you see, Janaki era, it was actually last till 1903 actually, because Janaki was a magazine, and that magazine ceased to continue by 1903. But that era continues. Okay, Janaki era continues to another 50 years. So, and Janaki era, during that era, a lot of romantic poetry also introduced. So, in that way, romanticism is associated with the Janaki era. So, known for romanticism. If you look at the literary tradition of Assam, and new trend has been have been developed during that period of time. New prose style has been developed, short stories developed, and drama developed. So in that way, it has all these had enriched the Assamese literature. And when you're talking about Arunodaya era, and Arunodaya happened to be the first newspaper, and that has created a new trend. Started with this Baptist missionary. There are also non-Christian writers, as I've already told you, mentioned. We have Anandaram Thekiyar Phukon. He is also quite inspired by the Western style of writing. The writing, Assamese writing during the Arunodaya era was very simple, but some new prose style has been developed, and also it has given emphasis to drama, novel. Okay, so some similarities we get to find in this both era. So Arunodaya era was followed by Janaki era. Arunodaya era ceased to continue, then Janaki era come, and it continued. Then we will go about studying different eras, but not in this class. So we also have other form of newspaper, like in pre-colonial Assam and in post-colonial Assam. We have different set of newspapers came up, and now also see we have that Seven Sisters post came up, and then it ceased to exist. And eminent journalists like Subir Bhaumik. So he actually made many literary contributions in the Northeast on insurgency. Also, he had developed a lot of writings, and he happened to be a BBC journalist. So he was called to take this editorship of Seven Sister Post, right? And then you see, because of this Sarda scam, so Sarda, that scam, cheat fund scam, so it ceased to exist, that people. So now you see we have a digital media, so everywhere. On Facebook, when you open, you get to find one or two new channel, news portal. So that has created a new trend. So that we will discuss with you later on. Okay.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, then today I will finish here, and I'll see if second half I have another class, and I might take, I might not take. Okay, that I will report in the group. All right.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.